Doug, how's it going?
Good,
Good.
good. How about yourself?
Great, thank you. I know we're getting together to take a look at what we call the WOW formula.
Yeah. I'd like to learn a bit more about that.
Yeah, so why don't we just, we'll just jump into this, and I'm going to share one level of it because there's, a couple of levels with the WOW formula, but I think on a day-to-day basis, this is what I would share with people, okay? So
Sounds good.
the great thing is the WOW, all right, is about the holistic organization of work. Okay. Now, what becomes important here is that this holistic organization is about a whole systems, whole person perspective. Okay. So it's not just about the systems, it's not just about the persons, it's about how those interact together. All right. So from that perspective, what I do is I say, okay, here's sort of like the bookends of this story. All right.
Okay.
Because I'm just trying to say, okay, like here's some space, we're going to be playing around in it. That's what we're going to be working with at this point in time. All right. So from that perspective, that means is that there's a situation in which we're looking at. Okay.
Okay.
So from a situation point of view, if we're talking about mentoring, it's the mentoring arrangement, mentoring relationships where we sort of got a boundary put around those. It may be if you're at work, it might be about what's the situation of my team. If I'm at home, it might be the situation we're getting ready to go on our vacation tomorrow and none of the laundry's been done. Well, there's a situation there that's got to be dealt with, okay? Which then means, all right, is that there is usually some form of learning, okay, and educating that's going to take place. Because if I'm in that situation, I'm usually in that situation because I'm wanting to do some kind of movement. Remember, whole systems, whole person of work, right? You're doing it for some reason to move it forward, okay? Which means then you're going to be having to make a decision, all right, to move this forward. Now, that decision is made of the choices that you have found in here, right? Well, I'm in this situation. This is what I'm learning. These are all the things that I'm coming to understand. I'm going to have to make some kind of decision or decisions, all right? So it's possible to make some decisions, all right, to move us forward. Make sense so far? Any questions?
So far, yep, no.
Okay.
One, actually.
Okay.
Define systems.
Okay. Systems is about the inputs, throughputs, outputs, right? If you're going to bake a cake, it requires a system. Flour, eggs, all right?
Okay.
Some people it's a mix. I'm going to put those in a bowl. That's the through. I'm going to mix it all together, get the pan ready, turn the oven on, and I'm going to put it in the oven. And in so many minutes, I'm going to get a cake out the other side. That's the system we run through. Now, what usually happens, and this is an interesting component, is usually what the outcome is cannot be then broken back into the original inputs. You can't take the cake once it's baked and put it back into you can't take the egg that was in it and now put it back in its shell. All right. And in human systems, whole systems, whole person, organizational work, you're moving forward. It's not like, oh, we didn't like this. We'll take it all apart. We'll reconstitute it, put it all back together and start again. No, you just got to keep moving. You got to do the adjustments and make it work. That's the whole systems, whole person perspective.
Okay.
Okay. So if this is about the decisions, then the decisions lead you to the actions. What action are you going to take to move it forward? So in other words, what's the verb that's particular to what's going on? I'm going to manage the systems of my team development. I am going to manage the baking of the cake, right? Maybe all I need to do is I just need to identify the steps necessary to get the new machine up and running. Maybe what I need to do is I need to define the term mentoring so that I'm clear about the different elements that make up this process called mentoring. I'm just going to define them right now because that's all I'm going to do today. But tomorrow I might go, okay, well, what are identify the types of mentoring.
Mhm.
Okay. So again, the action verb becomes very important. All right. Which then means you need to know what outcome you're associating with that action. What will you have as a result of taking this action? Okay. Now, knowing it's a system, it does in some ways link back because baking that cake, if it tastes really good, what are you going to do maybe in a week's time? Bake another cake, right? But you're going to go, oh, geez, I don't know if I want the same cake as I had last week. Is there a different kind of cake I can make, right? It's like when you go into your mentoring, the next time you go to do mentoring and the person is different, you can't necessarily use what you used last time with this new person. And even if you're mentoring a person over time, the next time you get together, there's been enough of a shift that, oh, hang on a minute, we got to look at this maybe a little bit differently. Okay. So the sense of this is sort of like they move in, they get you to allow you to do your decisions so you can move it out into action outcomes. That's why it's a holistic organization work. This helps to organize it in a very simple way. I got to situate it. Okay, we're talking about a mentoring relationship. What do I need to learn to set this up? What do I need to learn to keep it going? What does the mentee need to understand it? What decisions are we going to make inside it? How are we going to, what actions are we going to take? What outcomes, right, are we looking for, right? Okay, so far?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Now, here's the interesting thing that I found out when looking at this, because as much as it's a simple enough system, there are variables that are playing themselves out against this system. The first thing is there are always issues at play. In other words, issues is another way of talking about questions. Questions are always coming to this, right? Because if we're creating a system, it could be, why are we creating this system, right? Why are we doing this work? How do we do this work? Like there's questions and questions and questions that come to it, which means then is I've got to figure out what are the initiatives I'm going to take, or another way of looking at it, what are the answers to the questions? Okay. Because sometimes I'll get this far, right? I just sort of got, next time, I got this far. Next time I only got this far. Next time I got this far. Next time is, Christmas, I went back. right? So the questions in that and the issue, they're not always going to get you the same endpoint. They may get you to places where you go, okay, well, that'll get me to that. That might get me to that one. And you just keep moving forward. Okay. So there's always that element of what's unfolding for you. Okay.
Mhm.
Another thing that I realized is that this all operates in time and space. Let's use mentoring. We're going to have meeting C because we've done A and B, but C is not in the office. It's actually at the coffee shop. It's a different space. But it's 3 weeks later from when we did our last B meeting in the office. So time and space is going to influence, because between the last time we talked, it's been 2 weeks, but we're going to have that conversation in a different place. These are variables that are going to influence what's taking place, because the conversation is going to take place with a different situational variable. Okay. I've also noticed that there are two broad outcomes that are associated with the use of this. The first one is profitability. So yes, profitability from a money point of view, but there's profitability of ideas. Wow, in our mentoring, I got these ideas, right? It might
Right.
come from a place of relationships. I got new relationship. My mentor introduced me to a couple of people, not that, I'm going to follow them, but maybe there might be a mentoring relationship. I want to start with them, right? These kind of things, and all the way up to how profitability might be is how you shift your own life context, but also it might lead to your family. It might lead to your work group. There's profitability from bringing all of that together. So it's not just about money. Okay. The other one is it's about movement. Because if you're doing this, there is some sense of movement. And let's just start from a physical point of view. If you're mentoring and you're in two different places, then there's movement to get from one place to another. Like it's a simple sort of cut of contact, but it's a movement up to, because of what you do, how might that contribute to something that's going to be of use for the world? Okay, social cultural movement, right? So let me go back to baking the cake, okay, just for the fun of it, all right? The profitability of baking the cake is that you're able to take the ideas of learning how to bake a cake, all right? If you bake the cake and you sold it, you could make money, bakeries.
Mhm.
But maybe the baking of the cake is a birthday cake, which will build a relationship within the family. Okay. And therefore, this notion of the profitability. So the movement is actually making it. Another one is walking it out into the living room with the candles on it and having the person blow it out and showing the commitment to that relationship, right?
Mm.
And the movement that you're doing it versus I'm just sitting in one spot and everyone's doing it for me, right? There's some truth there. There's some people, they create the system and they have other people work it. That's why we have layers of systems in organizations,
Mhm.
right? That kind of idea. All right. So the other thing that I came to understand is the following, is that between this profitability movement, time and space is what we call shift, right?
Okay.
A shift takes place. And from this time and space to go to the next time and space, there's been some profitability and movement. There's been some shift that's taken place. And usually we can come back and associate that with what's the story that I'm now telling.
Okay.
And we know that how important story is to mentoring. A great mentor is able to pull out of their lived experience some stories that helps to illustrate a point without telling a person, you must do this. Okay? So the story, the shift, the significance that's there. Okay? Which then means that on any given day, from a time and space point of view, time is constant. So you better use it wisely.
Mm-hmm.
Space is intermittent because you can be in this space here, that space there, that's a different space than those two. That space, actually, we're going to go back there. So there's different kinds of spaces in which you find yourself. All right. And one of the last points that I would just make today is the following. Any system, while we look for efficiencies to make it straight, not all human systems are straight lines. What we're looking for is the straightest line to take those initiatives to get that movement and profitability. Life isn't about a straight line. There's some mechanical systems that have a straight line, but even then we could probably at an anatomical atom level, should say, some people could challenge that. So normally when we're using this, we're doing things like mentoring and all that. Even if you're baking a cake, and the first time you baked the cake and it took 51 minutes, the next time you bake the next cake, it may take 65 minutes because there was a little bit more effort had to be put into it, right? It isn't always like just a straight line, okay? So I always say it isn't like that. It's more like it weaves, but you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you enter into this holistic organizational work from a whole system, whole person, there are these elements that make up that wow. Sometimes I call it the wow formula. Okay. But what I'm doing is I'm paying attention to the situation learning because there's issues and initiatives of the decisions that I make leads me to the action outcomes, which then allows me to understand how I'm using time and space to get profitability and movement. Any thoughts?
Okay. I like it. Yeah, I like it.
So from a journey mentor point of view, you actually could end up in a situation where you got to really pay attention to what's going on, scan and pick up what's taking place for your mentee at that point in time, because you have to learn what's taking place. And sometimes people will put a mask on and you've got to sort of get past that mask to find out what's there without necessarily taking action outcomes, make a decision to take action outcomes, that I'm all of a sudden going to start using counseling.
Yeah.
Because as a journey mentor, you have to pick it up and work with mentoring to bring it forward, or their action outcome is maybe there's something going on where that person needs to go see a counselor.
Yep.
Okay. So I found this to be very useful no matter what situation I'm in, because it helps me to think through where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
I can use it with a group, a team. I can use it with the mentee. I can use it for myself. I can give it as a tool to the mentee so that they can come better prepared for a meeting with me as a mentor.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see a lot of use of this being part of the toolkit.
Yeah. And then what you can do is you can dig in more, okay, from a decision point of view, is learning about eco-ethical decision making, right? You can dive into that. You can dive into how to situate which verb at what point in time, the outcomes that you're looking for, and being clear in the writing of those outcomes. I remember there's a detergent commercial on TV, and the parents are leaving for the day, and they ask the young son to wash the clothes, right? And he did it. And when the parents came home, they said, "Oh, that's great. It's too bad you didn't fold them." He says, "Well, that wasn't part of the instructions." Right? So knowing what that outcome is and the actions you want to take, and then you can go, okay, what's the situation? What's the learning that's going to set this up for you? All right. Which would probably require some educating that takes place. So from a mentoring point of view, if you slip into educating from a counseling point of view or an instructing point of view or a trainer point of view, then you may be defeating yourself from a mentoring point of view. Whereas how do you set up the learning from an educating point of view using mentoring techniques to help the person make the decisions?